40 days later, and Goliath is still taunting the armies of God. But a young man named David arrives, having the confidence to face this giant. But his own brother and King Saul have their doubts. What does this teach us about how to overcome our own really big problems? I'm Pastor Jason Barnett, and this is the Dirt Path Sermon Podcast.
Morning and evening. Jesse said to his son David, "Take for your brothers an ephah of this parched grain and these 10 loaves, and carry them quickly to the camp to your brothers. Also take these 10 cheeses to the commander of the 3,000. See how your brothers fare, and bring some token from them." Now Saul and they and all the men of Israel were in the valley of Elah fighting with the Philistines. David rose early in the morning, left the sheep with the keeper, took the provisions, and went as Jesse had commanded him. He came to the encampment as the army was going forth to the battle, shouting a war cry. Israel and the Philistines drew up for battle, army against army. David left the things in the charge of the keeper of the baggage, ran to the ranks, and went and greeted his brothers. And as he talked with them, the champion, the Philistine of Gath, Goliath by name, came up out of the ranks of the Philistines and spoke the same words as before. And David heard them. All the Israelites, when they saw the man, fled from him and were very much afraid. The Israelites said, "Have you seen this man who comes up? Surely he has come up to defy Israel. The king will greatly enrich the man who kills him, and will give him his daughter and make his family free in Israel." David said to the men who stood by him, "What shall be done for the man who kills this Philistine and takes away the reproach from Israel? For who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should defy the armies of the living God?" The people answered him in the same way, "So it shall be done for the man who kills him." David's eldest brother, Eliab, heard him talking to the men, and Eliab's anger was kindled against David. He said, "Why have you come down? With whom have you left those few sheep in the wilderness? I know your presumption and the evil of your heart, for you have come down just to see the battle." David said, "What have I done now? It was only a question." He turned away from them toward another and spoke in the same way, and the people answered him again as before. When the words that David spoke were heard, they repeated them before Saul, and he sent for him. David said to Saul, "Let no one's heart fail because of him. Your servant will go and fight with this Philistine." Saul said to David, "You are not able to go out against this Philistine to fight with him, for you are just a boy, and he has been a warrior from his youth." But David said to Saul, "Your servant used to keep sheep for his father. Whenever a lion or a bear came and took a lamb from the flock, I went after it and struck it down, rescuing the lamb from its mouth, and if it turned against me, I would catch it by the jaw, strike it down, and kill it. Your servant has killed both lions and bears, and this uncircumcised Philistine shall be like one of them, since he has defied the armies of the living God." David said, "The Lord who saved me from the paw of the lion and from the paw of the bear will save me from the hand of this Philistine." So Saul said to David, "Go, and may the Lord be with you." This is the word of God for the people of God. Thanks be to God. I get some oxygen back in my head before I continue to talk. Thank you. All right. So in between verse 11 and verse 12, and we ended at verse 11 last week, in between verse 11 and verse 12, 40 days has passed. 40 days. 40 days of the Philistine army and the Israelite army going out to the battlefield, each on their own hill, looking at each other. Goliath, a 9-foot-tall Goliath little person, and his little shield bearer will walk out to the middle, and Goliath, each and every day, 2 times a day, would say, "Send somebody out to fight me." And for 40 days, there was not an Israelite brave enough to take up that cause. And that included Saul, who was supposed to be the champion of Israel. That's why he was anointed king over God's people. But even he was too afraid to go out and face this journey. Now, the story kind of shifts. It moves to a man named Jesse living in Bethlehem. Has anybody ever heard of the town called Bethlehem before? In the Bible, have you heard of it? Okay. So that's an important note for later that I don't have time to get into right now, but pay attention to that detail. This man's name was Jesse, and he was an older guy. I like how the Bible describes him. In the days of Saul, the man was already old and advanced in years. It makes me think of how I got in trouble this morning for what I labeled the table for the sanctuary class for their kids. Wilma's still talking about it over there. Jesse, he was older, and he had 8 sons. 8 of them. That's a lot of sons, right? He had 4 more sons. He had a full basketball team all by himself. But he has 8 of them. But he had 3 of the oldest sons, Eliab, Abinadab, and Shammah. They had followed Saul to the battlefield. They were serving in the army. Now keep in mind, it's been 40 days since these boys have left home or left their father and gone off to battle. There's been this stalemate going on. And by this point, Dad's probably a little bit concerned. All right, where are my boys at? What's going on in the battle? It's been 40 days. Are they still alive? Are they doing okay? Should we rally some troops and go send reinforcements? Something. So he pulls out his son David. And David is the youngest of all 8 sons. He says, David, I want you to take this care package to the battlefield, give it to the troops, but I also want you to see how your brothers are doing. Just let me know they're okay. Jesse's being a concerned dad. And David's going to do exactly what his dad says. And this is how we're introduced to David. One of the most important characters in the Bible. The man is going to go on to become king over God's people. He's already been anointed to take Saul's place as king. That happened in chapter 16. Out of all 8 of his brothers, David was picked to be the next king of Israel. But how does he enter this story? And keep in mind how Goliath entered the picture of this entire story. Goliath comes in, he's big, he's ugly, he's scary, he's loud. But how does David show up? David shows up in the most unremarkable way possible. He shows up simply as running an errand for his dad. That's how we're introduced to this mighty warrior that's going to take over this story. We're introduced to him as a simple, unremarkable errand boy. Now keep in mind, he is Saul's armor bearer. That you read that in chapter 16 too. And Saul kind of has an idea who he is, but then again, he's still the youngest of 8 sons. And all he does is come and play the harp every once in a while when Saul's having a bad day and make him feel better. But other than that, that's for interactions Saul and David have. David is really nobody remarkable. Saul is tall and handsome. That's why he was picked to be king over God's people, because he looked the part. He should have fit the part. David, compared to Saul, was kind of bleh. Whatever. He's there. David to where he just simply taken a care package and checked on his brothers. When he arrives with the care package, he arrives at the camp just in time to see both armies take up battle formation, march out there, and then Goliath and his little shield bearer walk out, and then they do their little spiel. I defy the armies of Israel. Send out somebody to fight me. Nobody still wants to fight Goliath. They're all afraid. They're all cowering in fear. But that's when David learns what the prize is for whoever it is that decides they have the confidence that they have the strength to go up and try and fight this Philistine. You know what the reward was? The reward is simply, Saul says to the king, he says, whoever goes in and fights Goliath and kills him, I'll make him rich. And I will give him all kinds of wealth. They won't have to worry about money anymore. And not only that, I will throw in my daughter as your wife. Talk about an awkward conversation when he gets home, right? Hey, honey, by the way, you're married now. Congratulations. He's like, I'll throw my daughter in as a reward. And if that's not enough for you, this is the good one. This is the best part right here. So not only will I give you wealth, not only will I give you my daughter in the hand of marriage, but I also make it to where you don't have to pay taxes anymore. And all the people said, amen. No taxes. Woo! David learns this. And as he's going about asking the question and learning the reward for having confidence to go face Goliath, that's when his brother comes up and talks to him. You see, Eliab was the oldest. In chapter 16, when God anoints the next king of Israel, he uses the prophet Samuel. The prophet Samuel goes to Jesse's house, and Jesse parades every one of his sons past Samuel. From the oldest to the point where he runs out of the older ones, and Samuel has to look at him and say, well, hey, do you have any kids left? We've been through all of them, and God says that none of them are going to take that spot. None of them are the ones I have picked to be the next king. Do you have any other sons left? And Jesse's like, well, I got this one kid named David. He's out taking care of the sheep. Think about it. David was so young and unimportant, even in his own family. His dad didn't even think to invite him to this dinner party. He's like, well, you're the youngest. You're not that important. You just stand here taking care of the sheep. No, we won't worry about you. Somebody has to watch the sheep, and guess what? You are the shortest straw. Stay there. So Eliab, he knows that he was passed over, and David was anointed. He knows David was picked, and he was not. And so there's this little bit of bitterness, I'm sure, this little bit of jealousy and envy working in the heart and the mind of Eliab. On top of that, he's just big brother, and let's just face it, we don't have any big oldest brothers in here, younger siblings. Let's face it, when somebody comes out and wants to pick on our younger siblings, it's time to go, right? We don't have time to discuss it. Let's just put the battle rattle on somebody's getting their face punched. Right? And when our younger siblings are getting ready to do something dumb, you look at them and say, hey, dummy, don't do that. I'm sugarcoating it. We try and talk them out of it. We tell them how crazy they're being. So Eliab, he has this false perception that's been created about David based on his own jealousy and based on his overprotectiveness as a big brother. And so he's looking at David and says, David, the only reason you showed up today, the only reason you're asking this question is because you have a lust for blood. You're here just to see the battle and watch people die. You're just asking this question because you want to know what the cost is. He's formed this false perception, this false understanding of who David is and what David is there wanting to do. And he's calling David out about it. And how does David respond? He responds in the most little brother type way you can imagine. He looks at his big brother and he says, who asked you? your opinion. And he goes right on trying to get more information. And if having your big brother telling you you can't do it and questioning your motives isn't enough, the word reaches King Saul. And he summons David to him. And when David arrives, he walks up to Saul and he says, "Don't worry, I'm here. Don't worry, I showed up. I got this, King Saul. Don't worry, I'm going to handle this 9-foot tall guy and his little shield bearer too. I got it." David gets this on. He is oozing with confidence. He's just come from his oldest brother telling him you can't do this and questioning his reasons for doing it. But David is not discouraged. He still has the confidence to walk into Saul and say, "Saul, don't be afraid. I've got this." And how does Saul respond to that? "You're just a boy." "David, what are you talking? You're just a little boy. You're not experienced enough. This guy Goliath, he's 9 foot tall. He's been trained as a warrior since the day of his birth. This was his lifestyle. He's been molded and crafted to be a machine of destruction his entire life. And you're telling me you got this? You can't do this. You're too small. You're too insignificant. He's too big, and there's too much at stake." That even after being ridiculed and chopped to size by his brother, and even after being talked down to by King Saul, David's confidence has not wavered, has it? How does he respond to Saul? He says, "Saul, I fought beasts before. When I was taking care of Dad's sheep, a lion would show up. You know what I would do with that lion if he took one of the lambs? I'd take the lamb from his mouth, and if he tried to bite me, I'd kill him." When I'm talking about lion, I'm not talking about like the little neighborhood stray cat. I'm talking about an actual lion. An Asian lion is almost identical in many ways to the African lion. And David, when one of these lions would show up and take one of the lambs, you know what he would do? He would fight it. He would take the lamb back. And that went enough. He says, at that same time too, from time to time, bears would come and take a lamb from Dad's flock. And in this area, especially in this time period, the bears were actually more feared than the lions, because let's face it, the bear would come out in the wintertime after all the fruit was gone, and his only option was to eat one of these lambs. So when he and David encountered these bears, these were hungry, upset, and angry bears. He had every reason to be afraid. Let's face it, he had every reason to be afraid of the lion, but he wasn't. I mean, maybe he was facing the Chicago Bears or the Detroit Lions, he wasn't afraid. But these are real lions, they're real bears. He had every reason to be frightened and scared by it. But each and every time they would show up and take one of his dad's lambs, David would stand up and he would fight. And he would kill those beasts. And he tells this to Saul, and he says, and he ends that little speech and he says, "And this Goliath, this Philistine who defies the ranks of God, who defies the armies of God, he will be no different." I mean, the WWE couldn't cut a promo better than that. He's saying, I'm going to face this Goliath, and he don't stand a chance. He is outmatched. He is going down. And David, he has so much confidence, and his speech is so full of that confidence that it spreads to Saul. And Saul's like, "You know what? I believe you. Go ahead." And then he gives him his blessing. But that's an important detail too. Remember, Saul is supposed to be Israel's champion. He's supposed to. He's taller than everybody else. He's the best looking. He's qualified for that part. But he's too afraid to do it. But when David shows up, the one who's anointed and the next king over Israel shows up, what does Saul do? He doesn't say, "Well, you know what, I'm thinking I should do this." He says, "You know what, David, I believe you in your confidence. May the Lord bless you." That's an important detail for us as you continue to study in 1st and 2nd Samuel. And you see, you're going to read as the power of Saul as kingdom begins to shift over to David. But that power shift, it doesn't start later. That power shift actually starts right here in chapter 17 as he faces Goliath. And without really realizing, without fully comprehending of what's taking place, Saul blesses David and saying, David, you are Israel's champion now. David's confidence even convinces Saul to give him a blessing to go fight Goliath. Saul is unwilling to face Goliath himself, but he's willing to yield his role as Israel's champion to David. See, facing a really big problem, fear crippled Saul and Eli, didn't it? To the point where they saw there is absolutely no chance of victory. There's no way anybody can win. And not only did they have fear that crippled them, they had absolutely no confidence. No confidence whatsoever. They forgot everything they knew. All that they knew was they were not big enough and they couldn't do it. And let's face it, even if they had somehow got able to move and they had gone up and faced Goliath, they didn't have the confidence to do it. If they had faced Goliath that mindset of saying, we can't do this, there's no way we can win this fight, they would have become crow food. Because let's face it, when you face really big problems, it's going to take some confidence, it's going to take some boldness. If you don't have those things, you ain't going to win. You ain't going to pull through. David had confidence. Matter of fact, this is a little story. When I was finishing my training to become a combat medic, the last thing I had to do was a skills validation out in the field. And when it came my turn to go in and take this test, and I had to perform all these things, hands-on things to show that I knew what I was doing. As I got up, the sergeant looks at me and goes, Barnett, your turn, good luck. You know what I said? I looked at that sergeant and I said, Sergeant, luck is when skill meets opportunity. There might have been, depending on how you look at that story, I may have come up as a smidge arrogant, or I was the fact that I was that confident knowing that I have done this over and over again. I have practiced again and again. I have done it to the best of my ability each and every time. And prepared myself for this moment so I know that I can do this. Confidence. And David had that confidence. Because he had been there before. He had fought other beasts before. And he had come out on top each and every time. And this Goliath is going to be no different. Now when I talk about David having confidence, this isn't just like a confidence based in himself. This is not confidence based on his own abilities. David had a holy confidence. A holy confidence that was based on what God had done for him in the past. Yes, David had fought and overcome those bears and those lions. But it was God's blessing upon him. It was God's hand upon him that gave him the confidence to be able to do so. It was God who gave him the ability to fight and overcome those things. And as David sat there and listened to Goliath speak, he's the first one in this story to stop and think about it in the terms of faith. He's the first one to stop and think about it from a theological perspective. He realizes that David is not taunting Saul. It goes beyond him taunting the army. Saul is taunting the God of all, the God who was in charge of all this. He was defying him, as David saw that, and he said, you know what? If this guy's going to defy God, someone's got to stand up to him, and I'm going to be the one that does it. Because if nobody stands up to him, he's going to think that he's more powerful than God. And David knew his God would not allow that. He knew God would not allow his name to be mocked and ridiculed. So David not only had a holy confidence that God would come through for him, but he had a holy confidence that God would meet the challenge and overcome this Goliath. And David was so confident that it didn't matter what Eliab said, it didn't matter what Saul said, it didn't matter what anyone else said to him. He knew, because of the confidence he had in God and what God had created him to do and who God created him to be, that he was going to come out on top. And that confidence was so great, that confidence that David had in God was so pure and so passionate that it convinced Saul to give him the blessing and allow him to do it. What was the difference between these two? What was the difference between David and Saul? Why was David able to have confidence and Saul not able to have confidence? They both had been anointed by God, picked as God to be king. Both, God had said, you can be the champion of my people. Why was David able to have this confidence and Saul not? Because David had the Spirit of God with him. If you go back and you read some of the earlier chapters leading up to this event in 1 Samuel, Saul was picked by God, but he very quickly abandons God once he gets to that top post. To the point where it says God's Spirit left him. It's not because God didn't love Saul anymore, but because God is holy, his Spirit couldn't take part in the lifestyle that Saul was pursuing. It couldn't do things the way Saul was doing them. Saul wanted to be his own man. He wanted to prove that he was the champion, the rightful king, but he wanted to do it on his terms, not on God's. And when he ventured out like that, it says God's Spirit left him. And not only did God's Spirit leave him, it says evil spirits began to come and torment him. And that's why David had to come and play the harp for him. But that same Spirit that had left Saul, it was now resting upon David. And because David had the Spirit of God resting upon him, because he had the Holy God with him, that filled him with confidence. And if you and I want to overcome really big problems in our lives, we have to be more than just not crippled by fear. We have to have a holy confidence about us. And the only way you can have that holy confidence is to be filled with the Holy Spirit. That is the Spirit of God. It's a spirit that is a spirit of boldness in and of itself. It's a spirit that is resting in God and his presence and who he is and his ability. God is the Alpha and the Omega. There's not anyone who can stand up against him. And that Spirit of God can live within inside you, can dwell in your heart, it can rest upon you. That's unshakable, unmovable. And it gives you a boldness, it gives you a confidence to look at problems and say, Sergeant, this luck is what still needs opportunity. To say, Goliath, I can take him down. It's a spirit of confidence that's not restrained by the naysayers. It's not crippled by fear. Because it can't be. That's the spirit you and I gotta have living in this day. That's the spirit you and I gotta have living inside us and dwelling in us if we want to overcome really big problems. Because we need to have that confidence. How do I overcome really big problems? Do not lose confidence. There are going to be people who run their mouths. That's a matter of fact. But if you are walking in the Spirit, you're walking can stop you because you are walking in His will. It doesn't mean their comments don't hurt. It doesn't mean those comments will distract you from time to time. But it will not shake your confidence. It will not shake what God is calling you to do and the direction that God is calling you to go. And you have to have confidence in that. And the only way you can have that confidence is the Spirit of God dwelling in you. The only way to have confidence to stand up to your giants, to get past the naysayers, and move past despite fear, is through the indwelling presence of the Holy Spirit. It's only through that Spirit that you'll be able to get up and keep going. Against all odds, against what everybody's telling you, against what even you can see with your eyes. But if God's told you something, if you know who God is, you know what God's called you to do, then don't lose confidence. Go with boldness and certainty, knowing that God, whatever you go through, God's waiting for you on the other side. And not only is He waiting for you on the other side, He's going to walk through it with you. So we're going to close with a song this morning. The song's called Oceans. And it's one of my favorites. Because it talks about how God is calling us beyond where it's safe. And I don't know if you noticed, but one of our core values here at the church is readiness over passivity. And as a church, we believe God's not called you to come here and sit on the sidelines. And that means you and I, we have to be bold because God's going to call us out of our comfort zone into things that make us uncomfortable. But one of the lines of the song, it says, your grace abounds in deepest waters. Meaning, the deeper you get into that ocean, and the scarier it becomes around you, the more uncertainty that surrounds you. But as long as you're trusting and walking with God, His grace will abound around you. His grace will abound within your heart and within your mind, and it will keep you going. It will sustain you. It really is the amazing grace of God. But you have to be bold enough to keep going, to have the confidence, and to allow that confidence to sustain your hope and to keep you pressing forward. So as we stand and sing this song, think about that. Think about that. And if you don't have God's Spirit dwelling within your heart, as this song plays, if the Spirit moves you, then come and seek Him today.
Time for this week's 30-second takeaway. Having the indwelling of the Holy Spirit and having that confidence doesn't mean solving your problem is going to be easy. You're still going to have to deal with the same voices like David did. The same voices that question your motives, that insult your character, the same voices that talk down to you. But what the Spirit does is it gives you the strength and the courage and the endurance to keep pressing through those voices and look for the solution to the problem. That's all for this week. See you guys next time. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Dirt Path Sermon Podcast. It was recorded live at Greensburg Church of the Nazarene, located at 31 Bluebird Lane in Greensburg, Kentucky. Special thank you to Buzzsprout for hosting this episode. Please be sure to subscribe and share this podcast with somebody you know.